I'm 81 years old now. For about 75 years, I have a tattoo which I got in Auschwitz. And I would hide it. I was ashamed of it.
My grandma Sophie, my dad's mom, did talk about it when she would come to visit. She would tell us things sometimes. But it was kind of understood when I was younger. You don't talk about it with my dad. That just wasn't something you wanted to talk about. And if you tried, my dad was very adept at changing the subject. It just was sort of an off-limits sort of a topic for us growing up.
But then my oldest grandson was doing what is called in Hebrew a mitzvah project, which is a charity project.
My dad spent decades telling his kids no, he didn't want to talk about it. And suddenly, a grandson asked, and he's like, "Oh, sure, Jake, what do you want to hear?"
He had me come to synagogues and places to talk about my experience.
But there were a lot of gaps in the story. My dad was only 4 years old, and there were a lot of things he didn't know. So I started doing a little bit of research. We Googled Children Liberation Auschwitz. And if you do that, you'll see all these thumbnails come up with images of my dad. It's like a very iconic image from Liberation of Auschwitz. And we clicked on one. It said, "Do you want to visit the site?" I said, "Sure." Took us to a Holocaust deniers website. And I was stunned. My dad was livid. I mean, he was disgusted. He slammed the computer laptop down and he was like, really horrified. And I think that was a catalyst for him. I think that was one of those big moments where he was like, if the Holocaust deniers are talking, then he needed to talk louder.
Could you present yourself?
Sure. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Hi. My name is Michael Bornstein. I was born on May 2nd, 1940, in a town called Żarki, Poland. This is just about the time World War II broke out and the Nazis invaded Poland and Żarki. First, I was in a ghetto in our town.
When you think about ghettos, a lot of people think of these barbed wire encampments. But actually, more often than not, the ghettos in Poland at the start of the war were villages that were sort of ghettoized. Checkpoints were set up to getting in and out of town, and there were severe restrictions on any movement within the ghetto. People couldn't just leave. And there were severe food shortages, and there was something called forced contributions, which is just a fancy way of saying stealing. The Germans would go door to door and they would demand, on one day it might be a certain amount of food, or another day it might be, silver goods or leather goods. And so my dad's family hid as much as they could in their, a makeshift vault in the yard. And they really hoped and they really believed that the war would end quickly and maybe they could return to their lives.
And my father was actually president of the Judenrat in Żarki, where it's a go-between the Jewish people and the Nazis.
A lot of times, Judenrat leaders, they were viewed as traitors by their peers. These were the people who were deciding who goes on the train. The Nazis say a certain number of people have to be deported to camps. The Judenrat leaders decide who those people are. And they also, a lot of times, were looking out just for their own families and making exceptions just for their own families. And I have to tell you, when I was researching, that gave me more angst than anything else, because I thought, what am I going to have to tell him about his own father? Was he viewed as a traitor in his town? But actually, I was incredibly proud to see that there was a survivor who made it to Israel who documented what went on in Żarki. There was a survivor who kept a diary while he was in hiding in Żarki. There was a survivor who was still alive just up until a couple of months ago who shared stories with us. And by all of these accounts, my dad's father was actually viewed as a hero in the town. He set up a bribery scheme and he had influence over a particular guard called Schmidt. And he was bribing the German Wehrmacht to make conditions more bearable for the entire community there. So I was incredibly proud to go and be able to tell my dad that.
And then after that, we went to another ghetto called Pionki, And we were there with my father, my mother, my older brother, Samuel, and my grandmother, Dora. And we stayed there up till the time I was 4 years old, and the Nazis moved us to Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp.
At the beginning, he would hide under straw during the day when the women went to work. There was straw that was there to be used like a mattress because they were treated like animals.
I was there. I learned to hide very well. And first I was in a children's bunk, but the Nazis only gave us about a slice of bread a day. And I was 4 years old. The older children were starving too. So they took my bread away. My mother came in and she was beaten over the head for coming in to share some of her bread with me. My father and my brother were killed in Auschwitz during that time.
My dad's mom, my grandma Sophie, she was selected to be moved out of Auschwitz. She was moved to an Austrian labor camp. And that is great news for most survivors, except that she had to say goodbye to my dad and leave him behind in hiding. And so she really never thought she'd see him again. She had experience packing bullets from the Pionki labor camp. That's what she had done there. And she had small fingers that were good for pecking bullets. And so she was selected to be moved. She left my dad behind in the care of his grandma Dora and all of these women that were keeping him hiding in the women's bunk. Just before the Soviets got there to liberate them, there was a death march and more than 60,000 prisoners were marched out of Auschwitz.
My grandmother, by some miracle, moved me to an infirmary in Auschwitz where people were very sick.
He was being treated for something called dystrophy, or wasting away. The timing of the illness, undoubtedly saved his life because the infirmary wasn't cleared out for the death march. When Soviets arrived, there were only 52 children under the age of 8 who had survived and who were there, and my dad was one of them.
This photo is a photo that the Russians took when they liberated Auschwitz. We were pretty sick. The Russians fed us for a week and put us in uniforms again and took this picture. It's actually part of a video. And we've met these two women
about a month after Survivors Club came out. My dad gets this email, and this woman wrote him and said, "I'm the little girl sitting next to you on the front of your book." And she knew of another survivor she had heard who was pictured with them at Liberation. And within about 8 weeks, they all reunited. Sarah Ludwig, Tova Friedman, and my dad.
I've had this picture for years, and I always wondered, where are the other people?
Oh my goodness, that's me.
Yeah, that's you.
And that's me.
And what they realized is that they could have lived anywhere in the world after liberation. One of them lived in Australia and then Israel. My dad lived in Iowa, he lived in Indiana. But for the last 4 decades, they've been living just miles apart in New Jersey. So it's crazy. I was like, another miracle. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And actually, Tova Friedman's grandson was taught Hebrew by Sarah Ludwig, but they didn't realize that connection. And as Sarah Ludwig said when she got there, she goes, "Oh, it's like we're all family."
I just want to hug you guys. Can we hug?
Oh.
It's such a long time. After the war, my grandmother took me back to Zharki to try to go to the house that we owned, but people took the house over. They wouldn't let us in. And so my grandmother and I found a farm, and we stayed in a chicken coop with a board over our head. My mother was also liberated from the bullet factory. She came back to Zharki, and she was very, very dismayed. I had malnutrition, I was skin and bones, I didn't have hair, and so my mother took me to Munich, Germany, to try to see doctors and try to get a visa to come to the United States or possibly Israel.
My grandma Sophie knew that there were, they had that makeshift vault in the backyard. So before they left Zharki, she dug in that backyard until her fingernails literally bled, and she found the makeshift vault. Unfortunately, though, everything inside had been stolen, except for one thing. The vandals, in the area knew that Jewish people were hiding things, and they were looking under the foundations of homes and in all the crevices and, in the yards. And so they found most people's hidden stashes. The one thing that was left behind that I guess vandals didn't want was a Kiddush cup.
A Kiddush cup is used to fill with wine and make blessing, usually for the Sabbath. But we use it for all happy occasions.
It is the most prized possession probably that our family has. We will be using it soon for my daughter's bat mitzvah. We roll it out for the holidays. It's used on Shabbat, and it's just really, really special. It's that reminder, that physical reminder that you can steal everything from somebody. You cannot steal their faith.
In February 1951, we got a visa to come to the United States. It took about 7 days and 7 nights, and I was throwing up for 7 days because I was seasick from the ship. I didn't speak a word of English, and my mother put me in a school where I had to learn English, I had to study. My uncle lived in Brooklyn, and we didn't have any money, so he put my mother and I up in their dining room.
Then he and his mom got an apartment up in Spanish Harlem, and he used another aunt's address so that he could go to PS6, which was one of the best schools at the time, public schools in New York City. My dad always said he was invisible when he got here for those teenage years. Nobody talked to him. He was focused on school. His mom taught him, keep your head down and study. So it was kind of surprising that a couple of years ago, a woman reaches out. She said, I'm planning a reunion for the PS6 class. Somebody saw an article written about you, and we were trying to track you down. Do you want to come? So my dad went, and my mom said to him, why are you going? You were invisible. You didn't have any friends in that class. He decided he wanted to go, and he was glad he did, because so many of these people came up to him and said, we've looked back with regret over the years. We didn't reach out to you. We didn't ask you your story or befriend you. Some of the classmates said they saw the tattoo on his arm and they didn't know what it meant. And some said they saw the tattoo, they knew what it meant. They just, didn't know what to say. The teacher never asked, nobody. He was just there quietly. So now when we speak in schools, I usually show that photo of my dad from his PS6 class, and I tell that story because I know that when I was in 6th grade, I was not a bully for sure, but I cannot say for sure whether I would have reached out to that new kid. He didn't speak the language. He, was different. His clothes were different and everything about him was different. And I don't know. So I hope that people who hear my dad's story do better than, I might have done.
After going to grade school and high school, Fordham University, a Jesuit school, took me in, and I studied for 4 years, and I became a pharmacist. Fordham saved me because my mother moved to Havana, Cuba, when I was starting college, and so I didn't have any place to live. And Fordham put me up in the infirmary. They didn't have any dormitories. And then I decided I wanted to go on to graduate school. I had acceptance from Columbia, University of Maryland, and University of Iowa. But I didn't have any money, so Iowa gave me the best scholarship, and I received a PhD in pharmaceutics and analytical chemistry. But meanwhile, at Iowa, I met my wife, Judy, and we got married. and we are very lucky to have 4 children and 12 grandchildren, and they're all doing very well.
Traveling with my dad, I would say it's 99% awesome. There's that 1%. It's still my dad. He's still like, Debola, I think you should stand up and walk on the airplane. You're going to get a blood clot. He still makes me a little bit crazy. But overall, it's been the best professional experience of my life. Everything I do, he's like, Debola, that's great. Debola, you're such a good speaker. So traveling with him has been great. But more importantly, traveling with him has been powerful and rewarding, because I see again and again the looks on especially kids' faces when they come into schools and my dad walks in and they're antsy, and you can see they're like, oh, a speaker, you know. And as soon as my dad starts telling his story, you can hear a pin drop. The room gets quiet, and those kids, I mean, universally, they don't move for a whole hour. They listen so intently. And the response afterwards from kids who want to come up and shake his hand and they feel inspired, I think what my dad is teaching by telling his story has way more to do with teaching justice and empathy and compassion and tolerance than it even does about teaching the actual incidents that happened to his family and to other, people in Auschwitz.
Szanowni Państwo,
distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome to this commemoration former inmates of the camp and Holocaust survivors.
It was an incredible moment back in January of 2020 when my dad was invited with family to go back to Auschwitz for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
The first thing that happened was we were on the plane, and right from the start there, you could tell he already felt like a lot more connected to all the other survivors, but you could also tell the mood that was in the air. Like, it was not something good. A lot of people I know definitely dreaded going there.
And on the eve of that big memorial event, my dad and I were asked to be keynote speakers. We were in Krakow. All the survivors convened. There were dignitaries and diplomats from around the world who came.
I remember my mamashu crying, and for some reason, I remember the terrible smell, a foul, disgusting smell, and I know now that smell is burning flesh. I used to sneak out of the barracks of Auschwitz with my grandmother to find potato peels in trash cans to eat.
There's actually only one president who accepted the invitation to attend this event, and he spoke before us, and we were incredibly intimidated by that too. And this man kept looking at us because he knew we were nervous, saying, you're okay. In his broken English, he would say, you'll be good, you'll be good. That man was Ukrainian President Zelensky.
Опубліковано багато спогадів в'язнів Аушвіцу. Їх правда дуже складно читати, адже букви просто пливуть від нестриманих сліз на очах. Більшість цих спогадів об'єднує заклик. Не можна мовчати. Про це потрібно говорити. Молоде покоління повинно знати ці історії, знати про жахіття Голокосту. Щоб на цій планеті ніколи нічого подібного не допустити знову.
And after the survivors and the speakers had all spoken that evening, President Zelensky walked up to my dad, who was still holding the Kiddush cup, and he said, may I touch it? Can I touch it? And my dad said, hold it. And so we have this incredible picture of us standing alongside President Zelensky, myself, my sister Lori, and my dad, as President Zelensky holds that Kiddush cup for luck. Unfortunately, it did not turn out to be such a lucky time for President Zelensky, and I can tell you I wake up every morning, and I just pray, please God, let this not be the morning that he's captured or killed. I don't have words for the level of horror that while survivors like my dad are still here, walking the earth, they have to see that another horror like this is happening right now in Europe. Like, how did we get here? How did we not learn from past mistakes? How did we not stop this sooner? An authoritarian leader invading its neighbor and murdering people, like brutally.
A forced evacuation, a forced immigration. It's something you live through, and it makes it all the more painful, I imagine. When you hear Vladimir Putin use the word Nazis to try to demonize the Ukrainians, what do you think of when you hear that?
I think of Nazis shouting at me in German in the town of Jarki. I think of the Nazis trying to hide things as they burned bodies, trying to hide things. And you see Putin basically putting people in mass graves and hiding things. And it's disgusting.
And I see these families clutching one suitcase and hopping on trains, leaving homes they'll never see again. I know how painful that is for my dad to see. I hate it. I hate that that's happening. Yeah, in his lifetime, in my lifetime, in anyone's lifetime. We should have learned.
Germans boycott. Don't buy in Jewish stores. Germans, liberate yourself from the tyranny of the Jews.
I think education is key to see that Hitler didn't get very far, didn't get very much, but I think there'll always be other Hitlers, quote unquote, that want to take over the world, and they put blame on a certain people to, if things are bad for them, they have an excuse. It's not their fault. It's the other people's fault.
There are warning signs everywhere right now, if we only stop to see them. A book called Mouse was just banned by a vote of 10-0 by a Tennessee school board. A wonderful educational book about the Holocaust. At my own kids' school, there have been incidents of anti-Semitic graffiti on bathroom walls.
So for one instance, there was a text chain called Kill All the Jews with all the Jewish people on it, and which was just horrible. And then much more recently, a 6th or 7th grade student from one of the 4 towns that neighbors me, I go to school with these people every day. And they had one person put a bag over their head and said they were a Jew. And while they were recording, they took a video of them lighting the bag on fire on the head of the person.
There's legislation right now that says we cannot teach lessons in school that might cause people to feel guilt. That's happening down there in Florida. What does that mean? We can't teach slavery? We can't teach Black history in this country? The Don't Say Gay bill that says we can't talk, we can't use the word, we can't teach kids or say the word gay in school. How does that make a child who is gay or a child whose parents are gay feel? We are marginalizing people right and left in this country right now. Asian people are afraid to ride the New York City subways because there has been so much crime against Asian people. Right here, right now, in this country, there are signs everywhere. Those are the same kinds of signs that we saw back in the 1930s in Germany. The murmurs, the jokes about Jewish people, the cartoons in Der Stürmer magazine, those weren't funny because look where it led.
In Berlin, as well as in other university towns, un-German and improper books were gathered and burned by students.
Hundreds of white supremacists gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, for a rally to protest the removal of Confederate monuments. By the end of the day, a counter-protester and 2 police officers would be dead. It was one of the darkest chapters in recent memory.
Do not replace us! Jews will not replace us! The era of Jewish intellectualism has now finished, and the success of the German Revolution has also opened the road to the German way. The German to come will not be only a man of learning, but rather a man of character. And to this we want to educate you. This is a strong and symbolic action, an action documented before the whole world.